Hi, it's the M.L.M for the Soul channel. I do have a new topic for today. Before I begin, I just would like to say, may the words and expressions of my mouth and the thoughts and meditations of my heart find favor and acceptance before you, Hashem. And some people I thank who inspired me. I hope they can inspire you as well, and I will have links below this video to their sites. They are Rabbi Shalom Arish, Rabbi Lazer Brody, Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi, Rabbi Eli Mansour, Rabbi Elon Anavar, Rabbi Yuval Ovadia, Rabbi Daniel Asser, Nisan Baruch Black, David Sachs, Rabbi Michael Skobach, Jews for Judaism, Rabbi David Ashir, Rabbi Ron Ruvain, and Rabbi Yosef Chesney. As well, if you've never checked out this channel before, I will have a link below to my first video, which explains what M.L.M for the soul means, what it stands for, what I'm doing. So I'm taking a little break from the parasha insights for the truthful reason is that I don't have anything prepared. I could probably do something on my own, but so this is from somebody that I think I've done some videos on, not many, but it's called Chevle Mashiach. It's an email. It was from my mom, actually, and the person, it's from Rabbi Daniel Travis, and he's the Rosh Kollel of Torah Chaim. That's in, I think, Yerushalayim in Israel, if I'm not mistaken. It says it here somewhere. I just can't find that page. But I think that's where it is. And he calls himself the, quote, living on rabbi. So I call this one the ability to keep quiet. Now, the coming week, we're going to be coming up to the Asar B'Teves, which is a fast day. So this relates actually to Rabbi Daniel Travis talking about someone named Rav Moshe Shapiro, Zatzal, who passed away. But I believe this was in the year... a couple of years ago, so it wasn't, a few years ago actually now, that it happened. But it was very interesting, so I thought I would share this with you. So it's going to be a little longer than my usual ones are, but it has some really good information, so I thought that it would be good to share that with you. So, this is Rabbi Daniel Travis talking about this, Daniel Yaakov Travis. So he says, Klal Yisrael sustained its Torah this year on Asar B'Teves with the passing of Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal. And I just want to make a comment. I don't know who he is. I know different Ravs, but I don't know his name. But he talks about him. So anyway, whose depth of Torah, especially in the era of Nistar, which means hidden, was perhaps unparalleled in our generation. Anyone who heard the Rav speak understood that they were being exposed to the deepest Torah thoughts. But Moshe believed that one of the greatest problems of our time is the superficiality that exists today. I'd have to agree with that. He delivered his shiurim with the greatest eloquence and poise, and his personality, mannerisms, tone of voice, and content summon us to go deeper and deeper and not be pulled by the shallowness that surrounds us. This was the Rav's raison d'etre. That's his reason for living or doing his purpose. He was so powerful in his mission that he attracted thousands of talmidim, which is students from all walks of life. Both the greatest talmidei chachamim and Jews who are completely distant from Torah were drawn by the power of Rav Moshe's message. In a generation that makes every effort to pull us down, he used all his strength to raise up every single Jew. And again, just my comment, just from hearing what Rav Daniel Yaakov Travis says about who Rav Moshe was, I can understand how I would probably also be attracted to him, because it sounds like he knows how to bring things out to people no matter what level they're at, and that they connect to it and that they want to hear it. So that's important. So as powerful as Rav Moshe's words were, he felt that there was a medium that was more compelling. He felt that one of the most important traits that we have lost in our generation is the ability to keep quiet. He felt that there is far too much talking going on in our generation. Rav Moshe often cited the Alter of Kelm, who said that one should optimally retain a Torah insight within himself for over 20 years before relaying it. During this time, the idea germinates within his neshama, his soul, and slowly becomes part of his very essence. Only after it is fully incorporated into his personality and becomes part of his being should he expose these thoughts to the outside world by sharing them with others. And then he goes on to talk about some other things related to this topic, and still about Rav Moshe, but other things. So when Rabbi Gavriel Sassoon's 7 children tragically died, you might have heard about that. It happened a number of years ago too. Rav Moshe was maspid them in our base measures. He did a hesped eulogy. So Rav Moshe spoke about shtika, silence, explaining that the only way we can relate to such a tragedy is through silence. In the face of experiencing such midas hadin, which is the character of judgment, as a departure of 7 pure neshamos from this world, there is no other way to react. During the course of the shir, Rav Moshe paused many times in order to highlight the importance of silence. One of the listeners had a recording machine that would go off when Rav Moshe was not speaking. And since there was so many silent pauses, the total recording time was very short. And Rav Moshe heard about this recording and remarked, "You missed out on the most important part of this year." There were many great Rabbanim who were maspid Rav Moshe at the Levaya on Sunday. That was when this happened. And again, this is a few years ago. But the Rav was touched on this point. But the Rav who touched on this point of Rav Moshe's special attribute of silence was Rav Eliezer Pilitz, which is Rosh Hashiva of Yeshiva Tifrach in the Negev. Again, I don't know who that is. In the next two sections, I will cite some of the thoughts that Rav Pilitz expressed. So this was this other rabbi saying this. So in Malachim Ma'alef it says, and after in English translation, and after the noise there was fire, but Hashem was not amongst the fire. After the fire there was a faint voice emanating from the silence. So Malachim Aleph, which is Kings 19:12. The above verse relates that Eliyahu was Zocha, that who had the merit, to a personal divine revelation on the level of Har Sinai. During this time there was a great noise, and then a great fire, and then a kol dimamad daka, which means a faint voice. What is the deeper meaning of these three stages? The great noise and fire that preceded this revelation are not an accurate reflection of Hashem's ways. Where do you get a better idea of Hashem? It was the faint voice that encapsulates the revelation. Rashi explains that the voice that was heard was not an actual voice, but rather a kol that emanated from the silence, where the actual voice was not heard. These words of Rashi are extremely cryptic. What is the meaning of a kol emanating from silence that is not an actual voice, right? This sounds very hard to understand. So in order to answer this question, we first must understand what the difference between sound and silence is. Noise and fire are finite entities that have boundaries, while silence has no limitations. That's very interesting. It is only after all the fanfare of noise and fire has passed that in the depths of the silence you will find the Almighty, who is an infinite being. Again, it's still hard to comprehend what that really means, but I can understand what they're saying is silence has no limitations. It just keeps going, whereas the noise eventually stops and the fire stops. It has an end, where silence has no end. So since Hashem's ways are encapsulated by silence, even when the Almighty reveals himself, there is no need for a kol dimamad daka. The faint voice emanating from the silence was for our sake, so that we can connect to the infinite divine silence, meaning we have to have some kind of it's almost like we need a finite something to understand the infinite, even though we don't even really understand the infinite, meaning Hashem. So it's just a way for us, just like in the Torah they use different kinds of things, like Hashem's hands, his strong arm. It's just a parable, a mashal, something for us to kind of connect to, because we can't really connect to the infinity of Hashem and that he's just a superpower, and there's nothing physical to him at all. So Rashi means to say that the faint voice was merely a mechanism so that a human being could connect to the silence. So the best way to describe Rav Moshe Shapir was dimama, a deep inner silence. Wherever there was even a trace of superficiality, he fled. He was totally panemius, which means he was into the interior, not the exterior. His life was characterized by this kol dimamad daka, and it was that faint voice that drew so many people from all walks of life to connect to him. And then next, this is from Shir Hashirim 1:4, which is Song of Songs. The king has brought me into his rooms to exalt and rejoice with him. So the Gemara in Masechet Kedushin mentions a madrega, which is a level called Bokeh B'chadrei HaTorah, which is an expert in the chambers of the Torah. What is the deeper implications of these Chadrei HaTorah? So understanding Torah is like entering a palace. Just like each room that one enters brings one further and further into the chambers of the castle, so too the more one delves into Torah, the deeper his comprehension will be. When one reaches the innermost chambers, he is zocha, which means he has merit, to an intimate relationship with the king. The analogy to the innermost chambers of the palace is Torah, that is complete panemius. One can only reach this level if he lives his life with complete and total tznius, which is modesty. So Rav Moshe exemplified this, and for that reason was zocha to reach the deepest levels of Torah. Rav Moshe fled from wherever there was publicity and fanfare. When asked to speak at public events, he would try and make sure that his name would not be listed on posters. He did not want anything on the outside, only on the inside. When Moshe learned a sugya in Torah, whether it was a nigla or nistar, which is nigla is revealed, nistar, I said before, is hidden, he was only looking for the panemius. When someone reaches the madrega that he is able to enter chadarav, which means the innermost chambers of the Torah, he has arrived at the panemius of Torah. In his later years, Rav Moshe was in the public eye. Chazal teach us that even when a person has publicity, he has to remain b'tznius. Rav Moshe put all of his effort into holding on to his panemius in a world that is engulfed in chitzonius, which means out the exterior, always, like the materialistic and all that kind of stuff. So Rav Moshe's understanding of the deepest sodos, which is the hidden things, the things that are, I'm trying to think, sod is, the hidden, of the Torah, came from a deep drive to understand Hashem's Torah. Since his greatest concern was to get to the deepest depths of Torah, he was granted the privilege of understanding the deepest secrets of the Torah. Rav Shimshon Pincus, said that he had one of the greatest grasps of sod of anyone in our generation. Now, the Torah that now tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu was chavad peh and chavad lashon. That's from Shemos 4:10. Some explain that this refers to the incident that happened to him as an infant when he touched a burning coal and then put his finger in his mouth. This made a lasting burn in his mouth and tongue that made it difficult for him to speak. That's what it means. He had difficult speaking. So Rav Moshe often related the words of the Maharal, who takes a very different approach to this description. The Maharal says that the highest level of understanding is so elevated that it is impossible to encapsulate it in words. In fact, trying to express these thoughts in words confines the depth of these ideas. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the Isha Elokim, which is like the man of Hashem, and reached closest to Hashem that no human being has ever come close to. His level of thought was so elevated that it was difficult for him to express himself in words. And it's interesting, because I was just telling someone about this, how there was somebody, and I list all these people below, Rabbi Anava, who I've mentioned before. So he had a clinical death, so he, even when he describes his story of his clinical death, he says there's some things I can't even describe in words. There's no words to him. It's just at such a level that there's no words in the human language, so to speak, to explain them. So it's like interesting that's what he's talking about, how Moshe was like that. That certain things the level he was at, there was no words to express what he wanted to say. This is what the Torah means when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was kavad peh and kavad lashon. When Rav Moshe would speak, he appeared at times to have difficulty articulating his ideas. Sometimes he would repeat the same concept over many times, each time trying to attack it from a different angle, with the hope that this new vista would enable us to understand what he meant. It was clear that this was not at all due to a weak grasp of the material, but rather an effort to bring such elevated ideas down to our level. And then finally, about the Asar B'Teves. So Rav Moshe was nifter on the fast, which means he passed away, of Asar B'Teves. On this day, we commemorate 3 fasts, which was originally on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of Teves. The first of these fasts was originally on the 8th of Teves, mourning the day that the Torah was translated into Greek. The translation of the Torah came from a desire to understand the Torah, yet when it was rendered into the Greek language, which has a beautiful exterior, this outer beauty minimized the spiritual grandeur of the Torah, and the day of its translation is considered a time of mourning. As a result, the Medrash says that after the translation, 3 days of darkness descended on the world. Rav Moshe lived his life to bring Talmidim to a deeper and deeper appreciation of what Torah is really all about. How appropriate is that on that day that we mourn the superficiality that was brought into the world with the translation of the Torah into Greek, we simultaneously mourn the departure of Rav Moshe, who spent his life trying to overturn the superficiality that the Greeks brought into the world. And then at the end it says, he has Zichro Baruch, his merit, which there's blessing for his passing for us. His memory should be a blessing for us. So so I found it very interesting. That's why I wanted to share this. Interesting. It talks about like the superficiality. That's why I say that, we have to learn also about that part, that he was trying to overturn that and bring the panemius, like the interior, the important part, the neshama, the beauty of that, and how that's why he attracted so many people, because he looked for that part in himself and in other people. So that's very important. And I hope and pray and that we will all merit to live and see the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days and rebuilding of our final and everlasting Beit HaMikdash. Amen. And thanks for watching.